Good morning, girls. Happy Thursday. First day of co-op. Fun. Today is a good day for me. My friend is flying in. It's going to be a fun weekend. All right. September 5th. The prince, Levites, and priests. Ezekiel 44, 1 through 31. Let's see. Then the man brought me back to the east gateway in the outer wall of the temple area, but it was closed. And the Lord said to me, "This gate must remain closed. It will never again be opened. No one will ever open it and pass through. For the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered here. Therefore it must always remain shut. Only the prince himself may sit inside this gateway to feast in the Lord's presence, but he may come and go only through the entry room of the gateway." Then the man brought me through the north gateway to the front of the temple. I looked and saw the glory of the Lord filled the temple of the Lord, and I fell face down on the ground. And the Lord said to me, "Son of man, take careful notice. Use your eyes and ears and listen to everything I tell you about the regulations concerning the Lord's temple. Take careful note of the procedures for using the temple's entrance and exits, and give these rebels, the people of Israel, this message from the sovereign Lord. O people of Israel, enough of your detestable sins. You have brought uncircumcised foreigners into my sanctuary, people who have no heart for God. In this way you defiled my temple, even as you offered me my food, the fat and the blood of sacrifices. In addition to all of your other detestable sins, you have broken my covenant. Instead of safeguarding my sacred rituals, you have hired foreigners to take charge of my sanctuary. So this is what the sovereign Lord says. No foreigners, including those who live among the people of Israel, will enter my sanctuary if they have not been circumcised and have not surrendered themselves to the Lord. And the men of the tribe of Levi who abandoned me when Israel strayed away from me to worship idols must bear the consequences of their unfaithfulness. They may still be the temple guards and gatekeepers, and they may slaughter the animals brought for burnt offerings and be present to help the people. But they encouraged my people to worship idols, causing Israel to fall into deep sin. So I have taken a solemn oath that they must bear the consequences for their sins, says the sovereign Lord. They may not approach me to minister as priests. They may not touch any of my holy things or my holy offerings, for they must bear the shame of all the detestable sins they have committed. They are to serve as the temple caretakers, taking charge of the maintenance work and performing general duties. However, the Levitical priests of the family of Zadok continued to minister faithfully in the temple when Israel abandoned me for idols. These men will serve as my ministers. They will stand in my presence and offer the fat and blood of the sacrifices, says the sovereign Lord. They alone will enter my sanctuary and approach my table to serve me. They will fulfill all my requirements. When they enter the gateway to the inner courtyard, they must wear only linen clothing. They must wear no wool while on duty in the inner courtyard or in the temple itself. They must wear linen turbans and linen undergarments. They must not wear anything that would cause them to perspire. Then when they return to the outer courtyard where the people are, they must take off the clothes they wear while ministering to me. They must leave them in the sacred rooms and put on other clothes so they do not endanger anyone by transmitting holiness to them through this clothing. They must neither shave their heads nor let their hair grow too long. Instead, they must trim it regularly. The priests must not drink wine before entering the inner courtyard. They may choose their wives only from among the virgins of Israel or the widows of the priests. They may not marry other widows or divorced women. They will teach my people the difference between what is holy and what is common, what is ceremonially clean and unclean. They will serve as judges to resolve any disagreements among my people. Their decisions must be based on my regulations, and the priests themselves must obey my instructions and decrees at all the sacred festivals and see to it that the Sabbaths are set apart as holy days. A priest must not defile himself by being in the presence of a dead person unless it is his father, mother, child, brother, or unmarried sister. In such cases, it is permitted. Even then, he can return to his temple duties only after being ceremonially cleansed and waiting for 7 days. The first day he returns to work and enters the inner courtyard and the sanctuary, he must offer a sin offering for himself, says the sovereign Lord. The priests will not have any properties or possessions of the land, for I alone am their special possession. Their food will come from the gifts and sacrifices brought to the temple by the people, the grain offerings, the sin offerings, and the guilt offerings. Whatever anyone sets apart for the Lord will belong to the priests. The first of the ripe fruits and all the gifts brought to the Lord will go to the priests. The first batch of dough must also be given to the priests, so the Lord will bless your homes. The priests may not eat meat from any bird or animal that dies a natural death or that dies after being attacked by another animal. Division of the land, Ezekiel 45, 1 through 8. When you divide the land among the tribes of Israel, you must set aside a section for the Lord as his holy portion. This piece of land will be 8 1/3 miles long and 6 2/3 miles wide. The entire area will be holy. Excuse me. A section of this land measuring 875 feet by 875 feet will be set aside for the temple. An additional strip of land, 87.5 feet wide, is to be left empty all around it. Within the larger sacred area, measure out a portion of land 8 1/3 miles long and 3 1/3 miles wide. Within it, the sanctuary of the most holy place will be located. This area will be holy, set aside for the priests who minister for the Lord in the sanctuary. They will use it next to their homes, and my temple will be located within it. The strip of sacred land next to it, also 8 1/3 miles long and 3 1/3 miles wide, will be a living area for the Levites who work at the temple. It will be their possession and a place for their towns. Adjacent to the larger sacred area will be a section of land 8 1/3 miles long and 1 2/3 miles wide. This will be set aside for the city where anyone in Israel can live. 2 special sections of land will be set apart for the prince. One section will share a border with the east side of the sacred lands and the city, and the second section will share a border on the west side. Then the far eastern and western borders of the prince's land will line up with the eastern and western borders of the tribal areas. These sections of land will be the prince's allotment. Rules for the prince, Ezekiel 45, 8b through 12. Then my princes will no longer oppress and rob my people. They will assign the rest of the land to the people, giving an allotment for each tribe. For this is what the sovereign Lord says: Enough, you princes of Israel. Stop your violence and oppression and do what is just and right. Quit robbing and cheating my people out of their land. Stop expelling them from their homes, and says the sovereign Lord. Use only honest weights and scales and honest measures, both dry and liquid. The homer will be your standard unit for measuring volume. The ephah and the bath will each measure 1/10 of a homer. The standard unit for weight will be silver and will be the silver shekel. 1 shekel will consist of 20 gerahs, and 60 shekels will consist of 1 mina. Special offerings and celebrations, Ezekiel 45, 13 through 46, 18. You must give this tax to the prince: 1 bushel of wheat or barley for every 60 you harvest, 1% of your olive oil, and 1 sheep or goat for every 20 in your flocks in Israel. These will be the grain offerings, burnt offerings, and peace offerings that will make atonement for the people who bring them, says the sovereign Lord. All the people of Israel must join in bringing these offerings to the prince. The prince will be required to provide offerings that are given at the religious festivals, the new moon celebrations, the Sabbath days, and all other similar occasions. He will provide the sin offerings, burnt offerings, grain offerings, liquid offerings, and peace offerings to purify the people of Israel, making them right with the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says: In early spring, on the first day of each new year, sacrifice a young bull with no defects to purify the temple. The priest will take blood from this sin offering and put it on the doorposts of the temple, the 4 corners of the upper ledge of the altar, and the gateposts at the entrance to the inner courtyard. Do this also on the 7th day of the new year for anyone who has sinned through error or ignorance. In this way, you will purify the temple. On the 14th day of the first month, you must celebrate the Passover. This festival will last for 7 days. The bread you eat during that time must be made without yeast. On the day of Passover, the prince will provide a young bull as a sin offering for himself and the people of Israel. On each of the 7 days of the feast, he will prepare a burnt offering to the Lord, consisting of 7 young bulls and 7 rams without defects. A male goat will also be given each day for a sin offering. The prince will provide a basket of flour as a grain offering and a gallon of olive oil with each young bull and ram. During the 7 days of the Festival of Shelters, which occurs every year in early autumn, the prince will provide these same sacrifices for the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the grain offering, along with the required olive oil. This is what the sovereign Lord says. The east gateway of the inner courtyard will be closed during the 6 work days each week, but it will be open on the Sabbath days and the days of the new moon celebrations. The prince will enter the entry room of the gateway from the outside. Then he will stand by the gatepost while the priests offer his burnt offerings and peace offerings. He will bow down and worship inside the gateway passage and then go back out the way he came. The gateway will not be closed until evening. The common people will bow down and worship the Lord in front of this gateway on Sabbath days and the days of new moon celebrations. Each Sabbath day, the prince will present to the Lord a burnt offering of 6 lambs and 1 ram, all with no defects. He will present a grain offering of a basket of choice flour to go with the ram and whatever amount of flour he chooses to go with each lamb. And he is to offer 1 gallon of olive oil for each basket of flour. And then at the new moon celebrations, he will bring 1 young bull, 6 lambs, and 1 ram, all with no defects. With the young bull, he must bring a basket of choice flour for the grain offering. With the ram, he must bring another basket of flour. And with each lamb, he is to bring whatever amount of flour he chooses to give. With each basket of flour, he must offer 1 gallon of olive oil. The prince must enter the gateway through the entry room, and he must leave the same way. But when the people come through the north gateway to worship the Lord during the religious festivals, they must leave by the south gateway, and those who entered through the south gateway must leave by the north gateway. They must never leave by the same gateway they came in, but must use the opposite gateway. The prince will enter and leave with the people on these occasions. So at the special feasts and sacred festivals, the grain offerings will be a basket of choice flour with each young bull, another basket of flour with each ram, and as much flour as the worshiper chooses to give with each lamb. Give 1 gallon of olive oil with each basket of flour. When the prince offers a voluntary burnt offering or peace offering to the Lord, the east gateway to the inner courtyard will be open for him, and he will offer his sacrifices as he does on Sabbath days. Then he will leave, and the gateway will be shut behind him. Each morning you must sacrifice a 1-year-old lamb with no defects as a burnt offering to the Lord. With the lamb, a grain offering must also be given to the Lord. About 3 quarts of flour with a third of gallon of olive oil to moisten the choice flour. This will be a permanent law for you. The lamb, the grain offering, and the olive oil must be given as a daily sacrifice every morning without fail. This is what the sovereign Lord says. If the prince gives a gift of land to one of his sons as his inheritance, it will belong to him and his descendants forever. But if the prince gives a gift of land from his inheritance to one of his servants, the servant may keep it only until the year of Jubilee, which comes every 50th year. At that time, the land will return to the prince. But when the prince gives gifts to his sons, those gifts will be permanent. And the prince may never take anyone's property by force. If he gives property to his sons, it must be from his own land, for I do not want any of my people unjustly evicted from their property. The temple kitchens, Ezekiel 46:19 through 24. In my vision, the man brought me through the entrance beside the gateway and led me to the sacred rooms assigned to the priests, which faced towards the north. He showed me a place at the extreme west end of these rooms. He explained, "This is where the priests will cook the meat from the guilt offering and sin offering and bake the flour from the grain offerings into bread. They will do it here and avoid carrying the sacrifices through the outer courtyard and endangering the people by transmitting holiness to them." Then he brought me back to the outer courtyard and led me to each of its 4 corners. In each corner, I saw an enclosure. Each of these enclosures was 70 feet long and 52.5 feet wide, surrounded by walls. Along the inside of these walls was a ledge of stone with fireplaces under the ledge all the way around. The man said to me, "These are the kitchens to be used by the temple assistants to boil the sacrifices offered by the people." Whew, some of that is hard reading, isn't it? The measurements and the rules and all of it points us to the perfection of God and the detail of God. But man, sometimes it's hard to read. All right, we are on Good Words, We are on page 16. Following the funeral, I returned north and we continued our trip. Barbie and I were in the car with most of our vacation behind us, the miles ticking away as we drove through eastern Oregon. My keyboard loomed in my consciousness like a storm cell building on the horizon. I thought about Inga as I glanced out the window. In the distance, giant swirling dust devil careened across the prairie, reminding me of my heart. My soul felt as windblown and bleak as the landscape through which we were driving. As the radio played in the background, Barbie asked if I had any thoughts that I would like for her to record for the book I was not writing. She knows some of my best thinking occurs when I sit behind a steering wheel with nothing to do but let the miles roll beneath me. She was trying to be encouraging. No, I said, I've got nothing. Maybe I should just go back to the office when we get home. This whole writing thing was a bad idea. We fell silent. Barbie returned to her knitting and me to my gloom, while the radio continued to offer up its playlist. A few minutes later, she turned to me smiling and said, I have a great idea for a song. I was only half listening, caught up as I so often am in myself. As as tired as I get of dwelling on my own stuff, I can't ever really stop thinking about me. I am my favorite subject, and in a perverse twist, the times when I am in most pain are also the times when I am most caught up in myself. It's a cycle, feel bad, you spend all your time feeling pleased with yourself about how bad you feel, which causes you to feel worse, kind of like a drunk going back for one more drink and then one more. I can't will myself out of my self involvement. I can't hammer my negative impulses into submission. The more determined I am to fix what I cannot fix, the less fixed it becomes. I wasn't paying attention, so I thought Barbie was referring to whatever it was that was playing on the radio at the moment and how it was a great idea for a song. I gave it a cursory listen, not particularly interested, and then muttered something about how, yes, it's a nice idea for a song. Barbie looked at me as she does when I don't make sense, which is to say, quite often, with an expression that made it clear the degree to which my response didn't fit her comment. I thought you were talking about the song on the radio, I mumbled. No, I just had a great idea for a song. Want to hear it? It's about looking in Jesus' eyes. She continued, I was thinking about people and how when I look at them, I only see the person, but when I look in their eyes, I see Jesus' eyes. Each verse could be about something I saw, high school kids or an old person or a soldier, and then the chorus would be about seeing Jesus in their eyes. And that's when I saw them. That's when I saw his eyes. Jesus has a funny way of catching me by surprise. How it happens is a mystery, as unpredictable as an earthquake, and altogether as powerful. He tends to appear when I finally realize that my attempts to control things, to make things better, to force the crazed monkeys of my emotions and thoughts to behave themselves and sit down to a nice dinner is simply not going to work. But maybe it's not so much about when he shows up as it is about when I am finally opening to noticing him. Maybe I'm just more likely to spot him when I'm finally forced to admit I am out of options. Just when I have myself clenched into a tight fist of self obsession, doubled over and immobilized and all crampy from ugliness and futility or fear or just general funkiness, Jesus slips in unannounced without a word, and with a word or a look or the touch of a hand releases me. Get a glimpse of his eyes, and my heart starts beating again. I can breathe. When Jesus appears on my memory, he is almost always hidden in unforeseen places or appears in unexpected ways, wearing the camouflage of daily life, looking uncannily like the people around me. Like most anyone, I live the greater share of my life standing in line at the grocery store, waiting impatiently for the person ahead of me to write a check. Who does that anymore? Interacting with my family, fighting traffic, paying bills, going to work. The truth is, I can look right at Jesus and not see him. I just see the stuff of routine living. Wallpaper blends into the background of its surrounding, becoming virtually unnoticeable after the first few times you see it. You walk by it so many times each day, it barely registers, unless a tear suddenly appears. I think that's the way we treat Jesus most of the time. We walk through our day seeing what we always see, doing what we always do, until a tear develops in the fabric of life, and that's when we really notice him. Something unusual or unexpected, good or bad, then Jesus gets our attention. Otherwise, it's just life. My faith grows brittle and my eyesight fades, not because Jesus hasn't been hanging around, but because I've been too self absorbed to notice. Occasionally, Jesus pushes himself forward. Why he does that sometimes, but not all the time, is something of a mystery. Maybe he knows there are moments when I need the assurance that comes from a more identifiable display of his involvement in my life. It's why I tend to look for him in all the obvious places. I've caught sight of him in the grand cathedrals of Europe. It's hard to miss him there. He shows up fairly frequently in my Bible study. I wander through the religion section at the bookstore and find him on the pages through which I leaf. I listen to the occasional Christian artist. I pray with my friends, and he is in all those places, to be sure, all the places I'd expect to run into him. But more often, it seems Jesus works in understated, inconspicuous ways. He moves on the periphery of my vision like a deer at dusk. And then, when I think I may have noticed something and turn to look directly at it, it's gone, leaving only a moving branch as evidence it was ever there. But isn't that very subtlety part of what makes the deer so invitingly beautiful? The presence of Jesus in life is often the work of a master. The presence of Jesus in life is often the work of a master of the inconspicuous hue, the delicate, almost elusive, even shy touch of the one who can seem more comfortable in the role of unassuming presence than of the garish, flashy attention seeker. The kind of quiet predisposition can make it a little tough sometimes to recognize when and where Jesus is going to show up. He operates on his own schedule. And while it is true he is always there, it is just as true that most of the time I'm not paying attention, and only occasionally does he gobsmack me into realizing it. Mostly, he's the Lord of subtle graces. It means that one of the most important things to do as Christians is to simply pay attention. Grace and glory most often arrive at loopy moments when we don't expect it, in ways we wouldn't predict, hidden even behind things tragic or difficult or challenging. They are moments of Jesus' hidden glory. I think I'm going to stop there. I have a note to stop a little later, but it's like 3 more pages. So I think I'm going to stop right there and pick up there tomorrow. Just so I don't go too long. What page am I on? Okay. All right, my friends. Yep. And we're often just too caught up in our day to notice that he's right there in all the things. All right, my friends. I know, Shirley. Me too. All right, let's go ahead and end in prayer. Father God, thank you for our time together this morning. Thank you for the message that we received today. Thank you for your word, even though sometimes it's so hard to read and sometimes it's so complicated and feels so confusing and heavy. And honestly, sometimes the words we read seem so unimportant, even though we know they are. Not to say the word, but the dimensions and the particulars sometimes just feels like so many words that don't matter. But if we stop and we look and we listen for the message that you have for us, the picture of you in the detail of our lives, the intricate details that you laid out for us, and how you care about all the pieces of our lives, not just the big things, but the little important details. And that is the message that I take from those words today. And I pray that the reading of your word blesses you and honors you. God, I pray as we go through our day, you will just help us to recognize you everywhere, recognize you in our lives as we go through our days. Help us to honor you with our words that we use with people. Help us to be kind and loving to others and to be a picture of Christ wherever we go. In your precious name, amen. All right, my friends, thanks for joining me. I won't be live for breakfast because I'll be leaving here in less than an hour to go pick up my sweet friend and her family at the airport, and they will be here for devotions for the next few days.